From the National Immigration Forum, I'm Ali&nbsp with Only in America. This week, migrants from Central America band together to flee violence at home and smugglers on the road, to make their way north towards Mexico, prompting a backlash from President Trump on DACA.
The Democrats have really let them down. It's a shame. And now people are taking advantage of DACA, and that's a shame.
Which leads me to ask, whatever happened to Trump's love for dreamers?
This should be a bipartisan bill. This should be a bill of love. Truly, it should be a bill of love, and we can do this.
Meanwhile, on the other side of the partisan divide, Democrats lay blame at Trump's feet.
If he cares about dreamers, or if Republicans care about dreamers, he can reinstate the executive order tomorrow with the stroke of one person's pen.
But up first, my interview with a journalist they call Mexico's Walter Cronkite, Jorge Ramos, who's hopeful about America's long-term future.
I would bet to you that in 20 years from now, the idea of an inclusive America that helps and promotes immigration will prevail.
In August 2015, Jorge Ramos, a Mexican who lives in the U.S., who is also an American who was born and raised in Mexico, was told by then presidential candidate Donald Trump to leave his news conference in Iowa. Here's how it went down, live on CNN.
Okay, who's next? Yeah, please. Excuse me, sit down. You weren't called. Sit down. Sit down. Sit down. Go ahead. No, you don't. You haven't been called. Go back to Univision. Go ahead. Go ahead. Sit down, please. You weren't called. Yes, go ahead.
That's Jorge Ramos
Hi,
of
Jim,
Univision.
yes.
He's being escorted out of the room. He was asking a question, and Donald Trump said
I
he
wouldn't
didn't
do
call
that.
on him. That's why he is being removed. Jorge Ramos refused to back down.
Later, Jorge was allowed back in. In the exchange that followed, President Trump, who had the only microphone in the room, made it personal.
Let me tell you, we're going to do it in a very humane fashion. Believe me, I have a bigger heart than you do.
Since then, as he did with President Obama, Jorge Ramos has relentlessly spoken truth to Trump's power, much to the chagrin of the president's followers.
It is clearly unfortunate that I've been living 35 years in this country and that sometimes I still feel like a stranger. Recently, a couple of conservative websites started printing a story, all fake, that I was planning to go back to Mexico. I don't know how they got that. I think it started with a show that I did in Spanish with Jaime Bailey, which is a very well-known journalist in Miami. And they took out of context part of the conversation. And now they were reporting that I was going back to Mexico. Well, in social media, it's been crazy because I've been getting all these offers of people willing to pay my flight, my ticket to go back to Mexico. GoFund accounts, all these people who don't want me in this country, and this is my country.
Jorge has covered 3 decades of international news, from the fall of the Berlin Wall to the war in Afghanistan. He's won 8 Emmys and been featured on Time magazine's list of the world's most influential people. But my favorite Jorge Ramos memory is the first time we went to lunch in Miami 5 or 6 years ago. It was a little restaurant a mile or 2 from his office. Certainly one of the most famous people to walk in the door, Jorge greeted everyone with a genuine humility and a sincere smile. He's just good people. We began our conversation with his new book called Stranger, The Challenge of a Latino Immigrant in the Trump Era. How did you end up writing a book about, your identity as an American who was born in Mexico, as opposed to, this very contentious back and forth with Trump?
Everything started when Donald Trump said that Mexican immigrants were criminals, drug traffickers, and rapists. I'm a Mexican immigrant, and everything started from that point. I never felt like a stranger in this country, and this country embraced me in beautiful ways. This country has been very generous with me. When I really needed the support of the United States in 1983, when I left Mexico, Los Angeles and UCLA and the US embraced me and told me, hey, Jorge, come here. We can help you. So what I've been trying to do since then is that to make sure that the immigrants who came after me get the same generous treatment that I got. But I cannot hide the fact, and I don't want to, and I cannot escape from the fact that I was born in Mexico. And many people might want simple definition of my identity. I'm an American or I'm Mexican, one or the other. But the truth is, Ali, that I'm both. Sandra Cisneros, the wonderful writer, told me that I am an amphibian. And I think I am. I'm Mexican and I'm American. I'm Mexican-American. Sometimes I'm Chilango, which is the way they call people from Mexico City. Sometimes I'm Chicano. California embraced me when I first came to this country. And sometimes I decide, I have two passports, by the way, a Mexican passport and a US passport, a green one and a blue one. And I vote in both countries. I'm linked to both countries. And as I write in the book, sometimes I decide to be Mexican or American, depending on how long is the line at the Mexico City airport. I wish I could tell you that I have just one identity. The truth is that I am many things at the same time. And I'm comfortable with being many people and many things at the same time.
And when you wrote about being amphibious and therefore being a translator between the two countries, the question that popped to mind was, well, do you ever feel like a fish out of water? And what does this mean to be a translator for either country? Because it has to be a challenge, especially in times like this when, there's just so much tension between the two countries and the way this is all playing out.
Just listen to me. I still have an accent. Believe me, I've tried everything. But when you learn English at 25, 26, it's not easy. It's funny because with my kids, they constantly help me with pronunciation, and I ask them, and they've been my best teachers. As a matter of fact, we both became U.S. citizens at the same time. But yeah, and in other words, when they were growing, and both of them were born in this country, I was learning about this country at the same time as they were. So they've been fantastic companions in this life and in this country. But the truth is that I think, Ali, I'll never be American enough to many Americans. And when I go back to Mexico, I'm not Mexican enough to many Mexicans. And that's where I live, in between worlds. And that's why it comes natural to be a translator. I think a lot of the young kids, the teenagers that have to translate to their parents when they're calling the cable company or medicines, or when they need to get an appointment for something. I'm exactly like them. I translate from the Latino experience and the Latin American experience to an Anglo audience, and then I translate the American experience in English to an audience who feels more comfortable in Spanish. So that's where I am. I'm doing this interview in English, and then in a couple of hours, I'll be doing a newscast in Spanish. And when I call Paola and Nicolás later in the day, I'll be talking in Spanglish to them. So I am a little bit of everything, amphibious and translator and Mexican-American and everything combined.
You said that you feel that some people don't think you're American enough, and then others don't feel you're Mexican enough. Does this help you maintain your lack of neutrality, as you wrote? The way you made the case that a good journalist is a journalist who questions power, and to question power, you can't be neutral. By operating between both worlds, does that make it easier?
What's easier is that I'm very independent, and I criticize the Mexican government, and believe me, President Peña Nieto doesn't like me, and he hasn't given me interviews since he came to power. And obviously, Donald Trump doesn't like me either. He's not my friend, and he'll never be. And I constantly criticize him. So I feel very independent. I feel that I can and that I should criticize both countries. As a matter of fact, you criticize the people and the countries that you love. And that's how I see my job. I understand that people resent the fact that I criticize the U.S. and the anti-immigrant policy of President Trump. But this is the country where I live. This is the country that I love. And I think it is my responsibility to do that. Not to be neutral. And I'll get into the neutrality in just a second. But I do criticize Mexico for the same things, for the corruption that I see in the government, for more than 200,000 people who have been killed in the last 12 years. So I criticize both countries. And my role as a journalist, of course, is to report reality as it is, not as I wish it would be. But the most important social responsibility that I think I have as a journalist is to question those who are in power. And when it comes to racism, discrimination, corruption, public lies, violation of human rights, or dictatorships, I think as a journalist, my responsibility is to take a stand.
So then, how long have you been reporting in the U.S.? 30 years, 35 years?
My first job was in 1984 with a local station in the Univision local station in Los Angeles.
So since 1984, do you think that there has ever been a common sense of what it means to be an American?
The moment that we're living right now with Donald Trump, Ali, is not normal. I think Trump's presidency has distorted the idea of what the United States is and should be. I believe in a United States that is tolerant, inclusive, multi-ethnic, multiracial, multicultural, that is open to immigrants like me, and that will continue being like this. Not only that, I think we have the numbers on our side. In 2044, everyone is going to be a minority. Latinos, non-Hispanic whites, African Americans, Asians, Native Americans, everyone is going to be a minority. So this country is becoming more and more diverse, not less. And that's the America that I know. If I were to bet which idea of America will prevail in the future, this idea of a multicultural, inclusive society, or the anti-immigrant idea of the United States that Trump has been promoting, that attacks immigrants, that is being racist, as his comments on Mexicans and Muslims and people from Haiti and African nations, I would bet to you that in 20 years from now, the idea of an inclusive America that helps and promotes immigration will prevail.
So how do we keep from allowing this to feel normal? How allow Trump from making this, just another day?
Well, by being incredibly active, by resisting, by saying no, by asking questions constantly. And I think that's what you do. And that's what your organization is doing every single day. And that's what I do. And that's what many people in this country are doing. I think what has happened with the Dreamers and with student survivors from Parkland, Florida, are two great examples on what to do. They are saying no. The most powerful word in any language is no. And I think you and I and many others are saying no to the anti-immigrant policies of President Trump. And go ahead. No, and then when Trump says that DACA is dead, well, he killed it. He's the one who killed it. When I say that he's the most anti-immigrant president, it's not because he ejected me from a press conference, but it is because of his statements about Mexican immigrants. It is because he wants to cut legal immigration in half. It is because he has arrested 30% more immigrants than Barack Obama in his last year, because he has deported thousands and thousands of people with no criminal record, because he has created a hostile and dangerous country for immigrants like me.
So you mentioned the word no, and one of the parts of the book is the letter to your children. And that paragraph where you lay out all the important reasons is say no. I thought that was perhaps one of the most powerful part of the book. It was beautifully done.
Late in my life, I discovered the importance of disobeying pacifically, not violently. I think to do it in a peaceful way is important. I think I have to disobey when a president makes racist statements. I cannot agree with that. I think I have to disobey when I see many politicians moving around President Trump and somehow normalizing his behavior and his comments. I think I have to disobey when I see that ICE agents decide to arrest a mother or a father in front of their kids. What kind of country is that? Do we want to live in a country like that? And I say, no, I don't want to live in a country like that. And because I don't want to live in a country like that, it doesn't mean that I want to go back to Mexico. No, it means that I want to change what's wrong in this country. It means that I won't take it. It means that I'll denounce it. It means that I'll say no. It means that I'll help those immigrants. It means that I believe that we can do much better with 11 million undocumented immigrants in this country than what we've been doing in the last few years. And I'm criticizing both President Trump and President Obama. Going back briefly on that, we didn't have to be here. President Obama in 2009, he controlled the White House, both chambers of Congress. And before Senator Kennedy got sick, they had 8 or 9 months in which they could have approved immigration reform. And because of a political decision, they decided not to. So I think we have to criticize both parties for the horrible situation in which we put our immigrants in this country.
In a moment like this, when things are, every day it feels like we have to react to something, what gives you hope?
The Dreamers and the Parkland survivors. I live about an hour south of or where the massacre happened in Florida. And I've been going back and forth many times in the last few weeks. Those kids, wow. I mean, if the future of the United States depends on the Parkland survivors and the Dreamers, I think we're in good hands. I think we've been doing something right, Ali. When I see those kids, those teenagers, when I see my kids, when I see the Dreamers, when I talk to them, when I listen to their ideas and their proposals, when I see how courageous they are, I'm so inspired. I think we parents, we've been doing something right. That gives me a lot of hope about the future of this country.
So the name of the podcast is Only in America. Every guest that I've had, I've asked the same final question. And that question is, complete this sentence. Only in America, ...
Only in America, a Mexican immigrant censored in his country can succeed being a journalist and fight with the President of the United States, and still nothing happens. I can go home, I can go to the supermarket, I can take a bike ride, and I'll be fine. Only in America.
Jorge, thank you very, very much. Not just for the conversation, but really for everything that you do. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Ali.
Jorge Ramos is a journalist and host for the Spanish language network Univision. There's more about his book, Stranger, and his life and work at immigrationforum.org. After the break, the president's fading love for dreamers.
Support for the National Immigration Forum comes from the James Irvine Foundation, expanding opportunity for the people of California, and from the Carnegie Corporation of New York, established in 1911 by Andrew Carnegie to promote the advancement and diffusion of knowledge and understanding.
This is Only in America. I'm Ali&nbsp. Just before heading to an Easter Sunday church service, President Trump tweeted, "No more DACA deal," and sprinkling his favorite all caps throughout the following tweet, "Stop the big drug and people flows, or I will stop their cash cow. NAFTA, need wall." I hope you liked the all caps enunciation there. In any case, earlier that Sunday morning, Fox and Friends, also known as the Presidential Daily Briefing, had chatted about a caravan of migrants heading from Honduras through Mexico, some of whom sought asylum in the U.S. Clearly, this news segment from Fox and Friends was what triggered the president. Senate Democrat Tim Kaine, Hillary Clinton's 2016 running mate, went on the Sunday talk shows later that day to question the president's logic.
He is either lying or he is completely delusional. Why is there DACA? Because a Democratic president, President Obama, supported by Democratic legislators, put it in place in 2012. Why is DACA threatened? Because a Republican president, Donald Trump, supported by Republican legislators, announced in September that the program was going to be ended. One person can save DACA. If President Trump believes in DACA, all he has to do is retract his executive order from September where he broke a promise to Dreamers and said he was going to end the program. If he cares about Dreamers, or if Republicans care about Dreamers, he can reinstate the executive order tomorrow with the stroke of one person's pen. And the deal that we put on the table was protect Dreamers and give President Trump $25 billion, every penny that he asked for border security. He turned the deal down. Go back and read what the White House and DHS said about the deal when we put it on the table. President Trump opposes Dreamers, or he could protect them in the stroke of a pen in the next 5 minutes if he wanted to.
So, what's going on here? Well, it's pretty clear President Trump is trying to tap into Americans' fears of a loss of control. In fact, Trump wants the public to believe immigrants are a security threat. Well, the data proves the exact opposite. Last Friday, for the New York Times, the Marshall Project reported a study where researchers compared immigration rates with crime rates for 200 cities over several decades. Their report found that in almost 70% of the metro areas studied, the immigrant population increased between 1980 and 2016, while crime stayed stable or fell. So the data is pretty clear. Immigrants do not lead to an increase in crime. In fact, if we want a safer country, maybe we need more immigrants. Unfortunately, the Department of Justice has a different approach. Reported initially by the Wall Street Journal, the Department of Justice, for the first time ever, will evaluate the performance of immigration judges based on how fast they can close cases. Now, the rules are supposed to address the backlog in the immigration courts and reduce delays in processing individual deportations. But let me put it in a different way. The conveyor belt that is the immigration court system just started moving a lot faster. A. Ashley Tabador, an immigration judge in Los Angeles who is also president of the National Association of Immigration Judges, said, "You're going to, at a minimum, impact the perception of the integrity of the court." I'd put it this way. With this decision, the tears of Lady Justice joined the tears of Lady Liberty. I'm Ali&nbsp. Go to immigrationforum.org for more context on all things immigration. Subscribe to Only in America and let us know what you think of the show by writing a review on iTunes. Our producers are Emily Chow and Regina Medina, and our executive producer is Kathleen Farrell. I'm Ali&nbsp. Join us again, same time next week, on your favorite podcast platform for Only in America.